So hi everybody, I'm Pam.Atwood and I am a gerontologist and a certified dementia practitioner, and I've been working with older adults with various kinds of impairments for my 25-year career. And this is our first show to really help create confident caregivers. So I've been working in elder care as a gerontologist for more than 2 decades, like I said, and I am always struck by families who come to me as a care consultant and say, I need to know if it's time. We think something's going with mom, maybe more care is needed, is it time? So I thought what we would do is we would start a YouTube channel and address some of the common questions that come to me as a care consultant and help maybe answer some of your questions. So, knowing that caregivers frequently are limited on time, we're going to keep these brief but inspirational and full of awesome content. So, I hope that you will give me some feedback and let me know if there are topics that you want me to cover. Some of the issues that we'll cover will include everything from dementia and driving to how to choose a home care provider or a assisted living or nursing home, how to avoid that if at all possible, how to deal with family dynamics, and all of that. I actually have been a caregiver as well, so I know that a lot of times experience gives us the wisdom, and sometimes it just gives us a whole lot of headaches and a lot of stress. So we will also be talking about caregiver stress. Part of my background is I am also a certified laughter leader, and so I really do believe, and I've been lecturing all over the area for many, many years now, on the power of humor as a coping strategy. So we're going to also end each session with a little lighthearted kind of comment or quote from someone famous or infamous. So let's get right to the content for today. So today's subject is caregiving and when is more care needed. Ultimately, I want to cover 3 main points, and that is, what are some of the indicators that might tell you as a caregiver that more care is appropriate. The first and our always rule of thumb is safety. So if someone is having sundowning and is refusing care, or is having a problem with medication compliance, or is wandering and are, here in Connecticut right now, it's very, very cold. Last night it was 6 degrees with a -3 wind chill factor. That's not appropriate if someone is going outside in the middle of the night, not appropriately dressed for the weather, or unable to find their way back in. Also, the other extremes for weather temperature, if it's very, very hot and humid, or you're out in the desert area and people might get lost, those are real safety risks. So when there are safety issues, that is something that we need to always come back to. Yes, more care is needed when there are safety issues. Now that's different than risk. A risk of falling, even if someone has one-on-one care, may always be an issue. So we're really looking at minimizing risk, but some things are easier to minimize than others. We can eliminate the risk of wandering with proper supervision, with proper interventions, with proper assessments and treatments. But a risk of falling, we can just minimize the risk and minimize the risk of injury. So that's really what we want to do here. The other thing to take into consideration is whether or not someone has the ability to summon help. Now, a lot of times people say, of course, yeah, mom and dad, they know 911. Well, my daughter is 10 years old now. She knows the number for 911. She could certainly call 911. I think actually in one time last year she did have to call 911. That doesn't mean that she feels safe and secure and knows what to do to keep herself emotionally stable. So a lot of times when we're dealing with people with a cognitive impairment, we need to take into consideration the comparative developmental age. Now that's a term that Claudia Allen and Kim Warkall talk about a lot in their dementia capable care programs. A comparative developmental age gives us some insight that this is developmental. So yes, mom, dad, spouse, whoever your loved one is that we're talking about, they have the cognitive ability to know what to dial in case of an emergency. That doesn't mean that A, they're going to know it and when to use it at the appropriate time, or B, that they're going to be emotionally stable enough in a crisis to be able to manage that situation. Let me give you an example with my kids. My 13-year-old Tom is passed the babysitter course. He loves it when we leave him home alone because ultimately he knows that that means he can spend time watching TV and playing his computer games at the same time. So he's all about being home alone, and actually has gotten to the point where he says, "You're home early, that's not fair." So, you know, you get a little end of the day reprieve and you go home to be criticized by the teenager. My 10-year-old, however, Charlotte, is now just starting to explore how she feels and if she feels safe being home for shorter periods of time alone. So the other night we had to go out for about an hour and she decided she wanted to stay home alone. Now, a year or two ago, she would never have asked for that. She would have been much too concerned. And what happens really is that person may be okay. I mean, what is the chance that the house is going to burn down? None. But if she hears someone come to the door or if there's a loud noise, she's going to be calling 911 over nothing. So those are the kinds of things that we want to think about when we're talking about someone with a cognitive impairment especially. We want to look at that comparative developmental age. So she's compared to an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old. That 7, 8, 4, 5, depending on how advanced the cognitive impairment is, that person may still know the number for 911, but that doesn't mean that they're going to use it appropriately. All right, and then the next thing about when is more care needed or when is it time to introduce more care is really about the level of stress on the caregiver. So when you're now losing sleep, you're stressed, you're distracted at work because you have all of these other kinds of things going on, and you're worried about mom, did she get up, did she take her pills the right way, did the caregiver show up? That's when we need to reassess what's going on. So a lot of times families come to me as a care consultant and say, you know, is it time for a nursing home? And really, in one respect, they're asking permission. So I always offer that. And I say, yes, if this is what makes the most sense for you to be the daughter, for you to be the spouse, for you to be whatever that relationship is, instead of just the care coordinator, let someone else do that. Let someone else worry about whether or not her insulin levels are okay, if she's got a little congestion in her lungs or something. Let someone else handle the clinical, medical pieces. You be mom's advocate. You be dad's best friend. You be the wife that you want to be. Those kinds of conversations are a little bit different and a little more in-depth. Sometimes it takes time to get people to that level, but ultimately, caregivers have to trust their gut. People usually come to me at a time of transition. So a lot of times when I'm staging someone's dementia, for example, what I can offer is not medical. I'm not a physician or even a social worker, a clinical social worker. I'm a gerontologist. So one of the things that I do is I can stage someone's dementia and give families insight and referrals for resources that would be appropriate for someone at this stage. And then kind of a roadmap of where to go from here or what's going to be coming next. One of the things that I tell people when they're coming to me for staging is most of the time people are calling me when we're in a transition phase. So let's say someone is at a stage 4 or 5 and I'm at the point of trying to figure out, is it a 4 or is it a 5? Honestly, they were probably at a 4, now transitioning into a 5. So one of the things that happens a lot of times is caregivers are sensing this in their solar plexus, in their, you know, their chi, whatever it is that the caregiver believes. They've got a sense that something's changing. Confident caregivers trust their gut, even if it's to question a physician or ask for a second opinion or consider whether or not another service might be appropriate and be helpful for mom or dad. A confident caregiver says something is shaji here, something is not quite right, and something is telling me to get another perspective. So if you are at a point where you're saying, I wonder if more care is needed, the answer is probably yes. A good care consultant can then help you identify which kinds of care can help with your long-term goal. If your long-term goal is to keep mom at home where mom has always been, take her out in a pine box, great. What do we need to do to put that into place? And we'll talk about that in our next segment on our next show. So I want to remind you to check me out on YouTube. You can follow me on Instagram or Facebook. Pam.Atwood is my name. On Instagram, it's Pamela.Atwood. and you can find me on Facebook as well. Our website is www.agingcareacademy. Again, that's agingcareacademy.org, O-R-G. So you can find our blog there, lots of resources, information, and we'll look forward to sharing more information as we go ahead and go forward. In the meantime, let me close with a fun quote, and this is actually an anonymous quote. It was sent in to me, and it is actually based on the Serenity Prayer, but this is the Senility Prayer. God, grant me the senility to forget the people I never liked, to the good fortune to run into the ones I do, and the eyesight to tell the difference. So let me say it again without messing it up. Senility prayer. God, grant me the senility to forget the people I never liked, the good fortune to run into the ones I do, and the eyesight to tell the difference. So have a good night from Connecticut. We are hoping that you will be confident caregivers, and we look forward to seeing you on our next show.